In this video, we're going to be showing you how to build the FT Simple Waco fuselage and also finish off your airframe. So the first step in the fuselage, let's go ahead and pop out our pieces and go through them. So we have the pieces of our fuselage here. The two pieces we can put aside for the moment are going to be the elevator and the rudder. So after putting the rudder and the elevator aside, what we have is our main fuselage piece, the top rear of our fuselage, the front nose of our fuselage, the nose doublers. The inside structure of our fuselage is going to be where our aura and our batteries and everything are going to mount for electronics. We have a landing gear doubler and two side plates for the fuselage. So let's go ahead and remove the foam from the areas we need. On the main fuselage, it's going to be along the bottom of the fuselage. The top plate, same thing on both sides. The front nose doubler, we're going to be releasing around the nose. We're also going to be peeling the paper on these two front sections. And then on our battery plate here, we're going to be opening up these two cavities here for our A-fold. Let's go ahead and do that now, and then don't be afraid to stop the video and pause it to make sure your pieces look exactly like mine. Now, if you want to keep this very light and get the most performance out of this and also avoid doing any extra nose weight, you can actually remove the paper from these three rear sections here. If you choose just to add a little bit more nose weight, maybe you're flying in windier conditions, you want a little more penetration, just pull this up about 4 or 5 inches and peel it back right here. This is going to give you the ability to wrap up the tail piece up around the back of the fuselage and finish it off. For this one, I'm going to go ahead and peel these 3 pieces. Again, it's just something you can do to take off a few more grams of weight, especially on the back tail, so you can fly with that even lighter battery in the front. All right, all the pieces are now peeled. Feel free to pause the video if you need. Make sure every piece that you see here like what you have on your building board, and then we'll move on to the next step. Our first step is we're going to be joining our nose piece to our main fuselage. To join these two pieces, we simply just need to line these up, and just like what we did on our wings, we're going to seam it together with a piece of tape. What I like to do is to get one edge perfectly lined up, use a small piece of tape at the very corner, let the piece kind of shingle over itself, the front being just slightly over top, using the undercut of the laser. Press it against itself, do another piece, and then I can come back with one piece and give a nice stripe right down the middle. Then we'll simply just cut off the excess. Flip it over 180 degrees. And we're going to place our glue starting and stopping about a 1/4 inch in from each section. So there's one section, here's our center, and then here's the far side. We're going to lay this flat. We can use our scrap piece of foam here, and we're just going to squeegee this nice and dry. Make sure you hold this for about 30 or 40 seconds to let it fully cure before moving on to the next step. We're going to locate our landing gear doubler, and we're going to line this up for a quick test fit right over the edge lines just to confirm where we want. I'll just use my fingernail and kind of pop it, and then we'll glue it down. And now what we're going to do, we're going to fill this area in right around the landing gear. Notice I'm keeping that area where the landing gear is nice and clean. Then we'll slide it into place. Rock it back and forth, right in between those edge lines, and let it dry. Our next step is we're going to put our attention towards the battery tray that we see here. A-fold means that the side plates go above the top or bottom plate. To do a proper A-fold, we're going to go down to the table, and we're going to leave the side plate firmly against the table as we rotate up the bottom plate to 90 degrees. Notice here that the bottom plate is not over top of the side plate. The side plate is over top the bottom plate. Once we're happy with the way that fits, we're going to come down through, we'll put a bead of glue starting and stopping about a 1/4 inch in, and then again we're going to use the table as our friend. We're going to go up 90 degrees, and we're going to sit here for about 30 to 40 seconds while the glue fully hardens. Alright, same process on the other side. We're always going to do a test fit, making sure that we have our fold in the proper orientation, and also that we can get up to 90 degrees. Once we're happy with that, again, we're going to focus most of that glue on the bottom of the side plate, starting and stopping about a 1/4 inch, then 90 degrees up, pressing firmly against the table to get that nice hard edge. Now that we have our battery tray complete, we're going to go ahead and install it into our main fuselage. You're going to notice 2 little cutouts right here and here on the very bottom. You're also going to notice this cut through line that goes through the front nose piece. Later on, we're going to be cutting this piece out and it's going to detach as our nose. It's really important in these next steps that we make sure that we don't put any glue forward of where that nose piece is going to slide over, or we're going to accidentally glue our nose onto our fuselage, and that's going to cause us some problems. So let's first try a little quick test fit. We're going to move this forward and we're going to line this up right where that notch is, right here. Once we're happy with the way that fits, I'm going to put a bead of glue on the 2 bottom plates, making sure that I only put on the 2 bottom plates. And then I can also put some on the side here, just to get that extra little bit of strength. Now we're going to go right down to where we were before, again lining up this little notch. Notice that I'm pushing down, but I'm also pinching in here. We want to make sure that this stays nice and 90 degrees, but also it doesn't keep us from being able to fold this up 90 degrees later. Now that we have that done, we're going to go ahead and do a test fit. I'm going to do it on the back side first. We're going to fold this up 90 degrees, and this is what we call a B-fold. A B-fold is where the side plate is beside the bottom plate. So in this case, the bottom plate will stay firmly against the table as we rotate the side plates up while pressing down against the table, giving us a nice clean edge. You're also going to notice with this battery tray here, it's going to make our 90 degree bend really simple. Now it's really important whenever we put glue, we don't put glue in front of this cut mark right here. We only put glue going backwards where it'll line up here. So make sure that we don't put glue in this area. And I like to actually focus on this area so we make sure that it doesn't go forward of this cut line. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to focus my glue on the side of the bottom plate. And I'm going to stop right here. And then I'm going to focus my glue right here. Again, not going over that edge. And we're going to press down against the table. We're going to go up 90 degrees, pressing firmly against the side. Notice I'm a little bit more liberal with the glue on the front side. I want to keep this plane as light as possible, and I'd much rather use a little bit extra glue to get strength, not excessively, than have to put nose weight all the way up in the front. Where I'm really careful about making sure I only use just enough is anything behind the CG. The lighter this is, the longer it'll glide and the better it flies. All right, that's one side. Let's do the same process on the other side now. Again, we'll do a test fit. Perfect. And then I'm only going to be putting glue in this area right here. And then also from this seam line on back to here. So do that first. Again, I'm starting and stopping about a 1/4 inch in, kind of accounting for how that glue is going to squeeze. And then I'm going to put my glue right here. Pressing down against the table. Now I can use the palms of my hands. I'm kind of pressing down and pressing in at the same time. You shouldn't have to force anything too tightly, and make sure you use the flats of your hands as much as possible so you don't dent your foam. If you look on the bottom, we have 2 nice, very crisp edges, and that's exactly what we want to see here. Next, we have our Fuselage Doublers. This is going to go directly above the battery box and kind of lock it down into place. The location where we're going to be putting this is going to be lined up with the very back seam that you see here, and you're going to notice that it stops about maybe 1/8 of an inch or so from where the cut line is going to be. That's to give us a little extra squish as we push in the nose. It can actually crush in a little bit. It's not ever standing too far off. So once you've lined it up with the back, and you've also confirmed that you have roughly a width of foam on the very top surface, you can go ahead, lift it up, and glue it down. Noticing for this, I have the non-90 degree angle pointing forwards. So we're going to line this up with the very back edge, press it down into place. This is a very similar build technique to what we do with our Twin Sparrow. So if you built the Twin Sparrow before, this should feel very similar to you. Same process on the other side. We never take anything for granted. We always test fit. Right up against the battery box, lining up with where the edge of our paper has been removed. And then confirming we have about 1/8 of an inch gap right there. You can go ahead, lift it up, and glue it down. So we're going to line this up with the very back edge, press it down into place. We're now going to put our attention towards the front of our nose, and we're going to locate the 4 doublers that we have. So I've arranged our 4 doublers here just in a mirrored fashion so we don't make 2 left or 2 right pieces. What we're going to do is we're going to stack this on top of each other, and notice that on one side we create a tab, just like that. Let's go ahead and line that up, and then we're going to simply place glue all around it, right around the perimeter, and we'll just fill in a little bit there. I'm going to press this down into place We're gonna line up the very front of the nose and also the cavity that we have on the inside of the former. Here's one. And then I'm just gonna leave this here, and I'm gonna go ahead and mirror that, make sure that I don't put down 2 lefts or 2 rights like we talked about before. Always do a test fit. Around the perimeter, a little in the middle. And then that rocking motion is just gonna thin out the glue really nicely, giving us a good clean edge. Put a little bit too much on the bottom, no problem, just take a scrap piece of foam, scrape it up. So we have our 2 mirrored pieces. So the way that these are gonna work out is the tab is actually gonna be on the inside of the doubler. So if we just kind of glide this in and push it all the way back and set it in, you're gonna notice it kind of perimeters the whole nose piece. And if you take a closer look on the fuselage, you're gonna see that there's an etch mark that we need to line up with all the way around, including the back edge. We'll do a quick test fit. Just find out where the etch mark is, make sure we're happy. It doesn't have to be hard up against the battery box. You just want to make sure that there's an even foam spacing on the front nose. Once we're happy with that, same process. I'm going to be a little bit more careful to make sure I don't have too much glue squeeze out. I don't want to accidentally glue anything that I don't want to. Just right there. I like to kind of slide it in and then place it straight onto the doubler, just so we don't squeeze any glue out in the wrong spot. Now all I'm doing now is I'm just looking for that etch line. I'm lining it up perfectly all the way around. We're gonna do the exact same process now on the other side. You see our etch mark, quick test fit, make sure everything goes back to where it should be. Looks good. I'm gonna be a little bit more careful to make sure I don't have too much glue squeeze out. I don't want to accidentally glue anything that I don't want to. I'm lining it up perfectly all the way around. Notice I'm pulling it in and then I'm going to push it back. There we go. Now that this piece is dried, I can open this up 180 degrees. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my fingers and my thumbs. I'm just going to kind of establish a very gentle curving motion all the way through. The goal here is to make this so this will naturally curve around without having to push it too hard or wrinkling the foam. So once it can do that with no problem, we're going to open this up and I'm going to put 4 beads of glue, 1 on each edge and then 1 right down the middle up to the score cut. So we'll start with the edge. 1, 2, and then I'm just going to put a nice heavy bead right on top of this foam. And then finally 1 right here where it's going to seam shut, just to give it that little bit of extra strength. We're going to fold this over. And now using the table as our friend, we're just going to rotate this up 90 degrees all the way to the very top and a little past. That rolling motion is going to give you the ability to cup this around without there being too much of a gap in between here. One thing we also did is we made the gap of the paper just a little bit wider than it needed to be so you can trim it back so you get a nice clean finished edge. We're just going to hold this for about a minute and let it fully dry. And now when we pick this up, we have everything glued down to this joint here. Our next job is we're going to go ahead and roll this back, make sure that it fits nice and smooth all the way to the back edges. Now because every time you roll this it may be slightly different, we're going to take our razor blade and I'm just going to mark right where this end is on this side and then on the end on this side. And the reason being, because now when we open this up, we can take a razor blade or even a popsicle stick. We're just going to do a perfect little score cut right here. That's going to be the exact spot that you can crack loose now. And we can use this portion here to fold the paper over and give us a finished look. The only other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a single bevel right at this point right here, just to make the wing slide in a little bit nicer. Let's just cut off the excess here. 1, pull that away. And you can cut this completely off. I just like a little bit more of a finished look. This is a technique you can easily use on any of your models, whether you're scratch building or building a kit. I'll hold that down for about 15 seconds. Although these are made of something very simple like foam board, we want them to last as long as possible. You can see we have a very solid reinforced edge here. Same process as before, except this time I'm just going to focus the glue on the doublers here since they don't go back all the way and I don't want to accidentally glue this shut. Right along this edge. And then of course, right on back both sides. Gently place this down, kind of into position. Flip it over and let the table do the work. There we go. And we'll let this dry for about 45 seconds. So now that our nose section is done, we can take some scissors now, and if we have any excess that we want to trim off, we can get a beautiful fit right down to the paper with a simple pair of scissors. There we go. So using a paint stick or a straight edge, we're going to line up the 2 score cuts that we have on both sides. Then we're going to carefully cut down right on through. There's one. Just right through that corner there. Same process on the other side. We want to make sure we don't go down more than the foam thickness, or else we may accidentally cut through that doubler. Just right here and right here. On the bottom. And then finally, just gonna fill these 2 spots in here and there. All right, we now have a perfectly formed nose that's gonna slide in and be a perfect fit every time. To lock our nose in, we're gonna hold this firmly in place. And with a twisting motion, we're gonna punch through both pieces. And then we're gonna go to the other side. And do the same thing. Later on when we're done with the build, we're gonna save the last little pieces that we have here and then cut off our blunt end, and we're gonna have 2 pins that we'll be able to put in to lock in our nose very easily. So just gonna put this off to the side, and now we're gonna put our attention towards the back side of the fuselage. Now this is obviously bowed a little bit because we've curled this in. What we wanna do is we wanna use the table as our friend, and we're gonna line up right on the very bottom as you see here. Make sure everything's good. This is a score cut, so we'll be able to open this up 180 degrees. And we're gonna focus our glue right up to the point where this starts to curl. At that point, we're gonna go ahead and put glue in afterwards, and we'll finish that bend later. So let's go ahead and put a nice heavy bead of glue. Notice I'm putting the glue right between the paper and the foam. And then now we're going to use the table again. I'm going to hold this firmly down with my fingers. I'm going to slide this right into position and press it firmly up against the foam. Notice how I kind of wander back and forth, just kind of scanning up and down the whole entire seam, making sure that every piece is exactly lined up with the bottom plate of the fuselage and it's nice and straight. Same process on the other side. We'll open this up 180 degrees. Focus a nice heavy bead of glue right down between the paper and the foam. That way when it squeezes out, it's going to also glue that paper, and we're going to stop right at the point where it starts to bend. And for a little bit extra strength, I'm going to put a bead of glue where we seamed it open. Fold it around. Bottom plate goes against the table, and then I'm pressing this in. A lot of times people think when you build these models, you have to use tons and tons of heat. More heat sometimes causes melted foam and lots of other issues, and it can compromise your strength. So whenever you have something that you can adjust down, I strongly recommend you do so. And that looks great. For this back piece, all we simply need to do is fold this up and into position and then trim off the excess. A little bit of glue here, then on the other side. And I can just use a scrap piece of foam if I want to roll that up and let it dry. All right, you can see as we pulled that off, we now have a very light back part of the fuselage, but at the same time, it's incredibly strong still. let's go ahead and work on the top plate. Before we glue that on, we're gonna go ahead and install our push rods, because that's gonna be the portion that holds our push rods and guides our wires. Now in the past, when we had our hardware pack, oftentimes you received what we call coffee stirrers. Now if you're scratch building at home, coffee stirrers are wonderful, but in our premium hardware pack, we want to actually give you push rod guide tubes. That's exactly what you have here, is a nice long length of hardened push rod guide tubes. What we're going to do is we're going to cut this section about the same length as the score. I'm just going to go a little bit longer. It's much harder plastic, so you're going to see that you're going to have to either use side cutters, a razor blade, scissors to cut down through it. There we go. Make sure you save the rest of this for later. And we're going to go ahead and put a bead of glue right down on the top here, starting and stopping just a little bit from the edge to make sure we don't get it in the hole. And then line up the other. There we go. Next, we're going to take 2 of our full lengths of push rod wire, and we're going to guide it down through the slot. Just use our finger and then guide it right into the tube. There's one. I'll leave this on the inside. There's 2. Now I'm going to come back to our fuselage, and we're going to give this a quick test fit. We may have to kind of open this up just a little bit, which is totally fine. Just slide this forward into position. And then working from the center of the fuselage back, we're just going to let it fall into place. There we go. Just making sure everything fits just as it should. We have a little bit of opening here that we'll have to do. And I'm just going to go ahead, just where this little tiny edge is, I'm just going to cut this little piece off right here, just so we get a nice flush surface mount. Now that we've done this once, we can do it again now with glue. Make sure that you practice the motions you need to put every piece in before you put the glue down. It's just going to make our job a little bit easier in the future. All right, so this time we're going to do it, but with glue. Again, we're favoring our glue right on the edge of the foam and the paper. Just a nice simple bead all the way back. Same on the other side. We're going to get the very front, bring it all the way up to the nose. Once we get that portion in, it's much easier just to work all the way back, using the flats of your hands to press it down into place. You may need to kind of open this up at the very back edge just to allow these pieces to kind of fit in and then pop down. We're now going to take our razor blade and we're going to remove the foam between these slot here. And then I'm just going to cut this around, tracing this. This is just going to give us a nice finished edge. You could cut this straight across, but you'll see why I'm not doing that in just a second. Here we go. Next, we're going to kind of position the push rods here so they're out of our way, and we're going to go ahead and address our elevator and our rudder hinges. All right, so we're putting our fuselage to the side for the moment here, and we're going to put our attention towards the elevator and the rudder. The first thing we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and cut down into our score line here. We're going to open this up 180 degrees, and we're going to do a single bevel cut on the elevator side. Same process now on the rudder. Open it up, and we'll do our single bevel cut on the rudder side. And just to make sure that these hinges stay good for a very long time, I'm going to take a scrap piece of foam and reinforce my hinge just like that. We want to scrape as much of that glue off as possible. So now I'm going to go back right down on there, and I'm going to scrape over just like a squeegee, pushing it right down into the foam and removing any excess. All right, that's one side. Let's repeat the exact same process now on the other side. Put that nozzle right down, right over the paper between the 2 layers of foam, and put a very thin bead of glue. Now we don't want to leave that there. We want to scrape as much of that glue off as possible. So now I'm going to go back right down on there, and I'm going to scrape over just like a squeegee, pushing it right down into the foam and removing any excess. We're now going to do a quick test fit here, making sure that our elevator pops right in. And you can see why I made that funny little cut here right at the very front. That's so that this elevator pops right up where we want it to. I'm just going to move it just a little bit more forward. And now you can see why we kind of cut around this and leaving this edge finished. It gives us a nice finished edge and looks great. Once we're happy with that, pop this up. And I'm going to focus the majority of my glue right on these two tabs here. A little drop on the back side. And I'm also going to put a little bit of glue on both sides here. Press this down in place one more time. Same process on the rudder. The rudder is really simple. We're just simply going to make sure we line up the notches and fit them in. One thing you want to be careful of, not to push it down too hard and cause this to bind. If you find that any of it binds, you can simply cut off a little bit extra on the very back. There we go, that's perfect. Once we're happy with the fit, nice healthy bead of glue right on the flat surfaces. Press it down into place. Again, making sure that we don't bind this up. And we're also going to make sure it's nice and perpendicular to the fuselage. We're going to let this fully dry, and then we're going to come back on each side and reinforce it with a bead of hot glue. Now that our tail is on, we're going to move to the next step, which is our control horns. All we simply need to do is take our control horn. We're going to go to the outermost hole, guide it back into the slot, and then press it down into place. Make sure that we're happy with the deflection, and then also the push rod's nice and straight. And we're going to do the exact same process with the other side. Furthest out on the holes. And then this one's going to go right to the back. Now notice that we're not installing any of these permanently. We want to just put them into place, so now we can put our attention into the orientation so we can bend our Z-bends for the front servo mounting. One's going to be a little bit further back than the other one, but we want to get them as far forward as possible to get all that nose weight up so we can keep the plane as light as possible and still have it balanced. So I'm actually going to make the second bend first. So I'm not going to be doing the bend that goes through the servo, but the bend that actually locks it into the servo. Once we have that bend done, I can now go and grip in about 2 to 3 millimeters and do my 90-degree bend. And I got my modified Z-bend, but done in the reversed order. I'm going to grab this now. I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. There's one. The reason it's so important to have this in the control horn is so you don't accidentally bend the push rod where it's in the same orientation. We want this to go through the servo arm to be able to go back and forth. Same process now on the other one. We're going to bend this 90 degrees. And now we're going to grip it about 2 to 3 millimeters in and bend it down. And finally, 90 degrees to make a Z-bend. I'm going to do one wire at a time. I'm going to pop my control horn loose so I can guide this through, and I can take this all the way in the front and hook on my first servo. I want my leads to point forward, and I've already scuffed up the back of the servo so the glue is going to hold on nice and tight. For my elevator, I'm going to go to the center hole on my servo arm for my elevator. And now I can back this back. I'm now going to place the control horn back into the slot. And now without having to do any kind of fine adjustments, I'm just going to simply center my elevator and I'm going to glue the servo right in place exactly where it needs to be. And once the servo's in place, we can do the exact same process we did before, just a simple bead of glue right over this. Press the control horn in. All right, and while that's drying, we're gonna go ahead and do the exact same process now on our rudder. I'm simply gonna unplug this, let the servo guide right on through. Take my servo that's already been centered. I'm gonna pass it right through the second hole. And I'm gonna place a little bit of glue right on the side. Hook my control horn up and then slide it in place and center everything up. And once that servo's dried on the rudder, I'm gonna pop it off just like I did before. Simple bead of glue. Press my control horn in, make sure it's still centered up. Then press on my backing plate. If you ever decide to reuse those backing plates, say you've used the plane enough, you want to repurpose some of your old gear, a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on that surface, the hot glue will come right off for you. All right, with our servos in, our next step is to put our wing hold downs in. We can simply use our barbecue skewers, and just like we did on the other ones, we're going to go ahead and pass through one side, then the other, then we'll pass it right on through. Give it about the width of your thumb and cut it flush. Same process on the front. The front's going to be going through a doubler. So we're going to go through one side, then the other, and we can even kind of look through there, pass it right on through, about a ½ inch on each side for the rubber bands. One of my favorite features about the simple Waco glider is the landing gear. The landing gear is absolutely incredible, especially when you're doing a tow launch where you're getting towed in the air. It keeps the plane stable from digging a wingtip here. In our included kit, you're gonna have a landing gear wire. Let's go ahead and get that now, and we'll bend it together. All right, so for the landing gear wire, you're gonna see in our new premium pack kit and stuff, we got this nice, beautiful chrome landing gear wire. We're gonna go ahead and do our first bend right down the middle. This is 15.5 inches. We're gonna take 15.5 inches, which, let's see, 15, half of 15 is 7.5. Half of that half is 7 3/4. We're gonna make our first bend right here in the middle. I like to bend it just a little bit sharper than it needs. And you're gonna see on the very bottom here, we have this cut through. We're gonna bend this as close as possible to line this up perfectly. There we are. Now right at the point here at this very end, we're gonna make another bend, but this bend's gonna be a little different. This bend's gonna be up and back, so it goes down and straight. So let's go ahead and show you how to do that now. I'm gonna grab it and I'm gonna bend it towards me, up and back. Nice thing is we have a little bit of give with this wire. We can always kind of get it right where we want. A little bit too far back. A little forward, there we go. That looks perfect. And same thing as before, I'm just gonna kind of mark with my fingernail where I want my bend. And you don't have to be too stressed about trying to get that bend perfect the very first time. It's more about where you bend it. There's that one. And now that I have that, I can start holding this and adjusting this right on the table. And that looks nice and perpendicular. Next, we're gonna measure out about 1.5 inches on each side. And we're gonna bend this down. There's one. And there's two. And now what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna hold this here and I'm gonna bend this until it sits nice and flat on the table. It's always handy, you can even take a ruler if you want, just to make sure everything is kind of the same direction. I'm gonna take the edge of my landing gear, I'm gonna gently just kind of push down through here, giving that nice open channel that we need. And the biggest area that we gotta work on is just this guy right here at this very edge. Everything else, as long as we didn't put glue in there, should go down nice and clean. And what we're gonna do now is just a quick test fit. And with that friction fitted in, we can simply lay this down. And what we wanna make sure is that the landing gear sits nice and parallel. We don't have it tilted one side or the other. If we do, we simply bend that and adjust it. Now that we have our landing gear all bent up, we're gonna flip it over one last time, and this time we're gonna glue it into place. To do that, we're gonna have a scrap piece of foam handy. I'm just gonna put a nice healthy bead of glue right down here. Keep in mind that you're gonna have to work quickly once the metal touches it because it will cause it to cool quickly. We'll press this quickly down into place. And then one final bead of glue right over top of it to lock it in. Once that's fully dried, we can install our wheels. Lots of different ways we can install the wheels. If you want to use wheel collars, absolutely go ahead. Another easy way, A very simple way to put your wheel on where it's removable in the future is to simply put some hot glue around the axle and then roll the wheel up against it until it's fully dried. And once it's fully dried, you can come back with a pair of wire cutters, cut it off. All right, same process on the other side. Just gonna put a bead of glue right around there. Looks a little messy. We'll roll the wheel up against it. Let it dry, and then cut the excess off. Let's go ahead and finish off our airframe. The first thing we're gonna do is cut a couple 1-inch pieces of our barbecue skewer. And what I like to do is just put a little tiny nub on there. Just a little dot. And we'll do it on the other side too. Let that dry. You can, if you want, put a skewer all the way through from one side to the other, but it's really not needed. You have plenty of strength on each side, and this is really easy to simply pull out the both tabs and then shove them in. And then also, if you want to put like any kind of extra things like FPV gear, you have extra capacity without that skewer passing all the way through. So we'll just put one side right here. Little twisting motion's all you need. And then same on the other side. Little twisting motion's all you need. Just like that. Let's go ahead and do a quick test fit of our wing here. And before we install our wing, we're gonna take one of our popsicle sticks, and just to make the back side last a little bit longer, I'm gonna go ahead and just do a slight crack right down the middle, just to give it that little bit of a V shape. Then I'm gonna put a bead of glue on both sides, and then press it down into place. This is gonna keep the rubber bands from digging into the trailing edge of the wing. Let's go ahead and take our aileron wires, guide them down through. We'll press our wing all the way up to the front there. First time that you fit this in, you're gonna wanna kind of press it in there and let it kind of seat itself. And then we're gonna take our included rubber bands, and then put it in place. Now typically all you need is 2 rubber bands to hold on a wing like this, but we did give you 4 in the kit. Now you're welcome to put 4 rubber bands on, but since this is a glider not powered, 2 should be more than enough, especially with the new rubber bands that we're including in our kit. At this point, our airframe is now complete. We're ready to move on to our next video, which is installing the FT-OR 5 and getting the ultimate setup for towing.